Welcome to our Law School Council meeting. I'd like to welcome our members and ask the staff to take roll to determine if there is a quorum.
Bakshian,
Present.
Basic,
Present.
Harrington,
Present.
Edidan,
Present.
Kenyon is not present. Murigabi,
Present.
Sassy.
Present.
All right, Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Teresa. Next is our call for public comment. Members of the public can make written public comments submitted to the lsc@calbar.ca.gov email box. Written public comments received by 9 a.m. on Tuesday are distributed to LSC prior to the meeting, and comments received after that time are forwarded after the meeting. Verbal public comments of up to 2 minutes will be taken now, first recognizing any individuals who signed up in advance using the link on the agenda. Or by raising their hand using the raise hand function on a computer or *9 on a phone. Staff will share a timer on the screen during the comments. Before we begin public comment, I did want to remind everyone that under the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, public comments must pertain to items that are on the agenda or be related to matters that are within the jurisdiction of this agency. Teresa, I understand that no individuals have provided written comment or signed up in advance. Do we have anybody else who's raised their hands?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. So next we move on, I believe, to item number 1, which is the chair's report. I just wanted to briefly acknowledge, I think, everybody on here that we are doing a lot of work right now, getting ready for the February bar, getting ready for the July 2026 bar, and then what the July 2028 bar might be. So just recognizing everything that we all juggle together. And I think it's just a very cool thing. And I appreciate all of you on the committee. So with that, I'll toss it to the staff.
I think that's me first on our updates. Let me just get my notes up here. I apologize. I have 2 updates to share with the council today. First is an update regarding our public solicitation for content validation panelists and subject matter experts reviewing bar exam questions for the future. We reopened the application for these positions following the approval by the Supreme Court of the eligibility criteria and recruitment policy. That application closed on Friday. We received in this second solicitation over 2,000 applications. And so we're currently reviewing that for the purposes of making a final list of recommended content validation panelists and subject matter experts for the chair and vice chair of the Committee of Bar Examiners to approve. Our hope is to have that list approved and to begin completing agreements with these individuals in March so that we can begin hosting content validation panels for questions that have already been developed under our contract with Kaplan Exam Services sometime in late March or April. Just as a reminder, the content validation panelists under the Supreme Court policy includes recently licensed attorneys, supervisors of recently licensed attorneys, law school faculty, and California judges and justices. Panelists are responsible for reviewing draft questions. They review them to determine whether or not they appropriately test minimum competency, ensuring they don't exhibit any bias, that the questions are clearly written, that they're cohesive in style, and that they accurately test the intended legal issue. On the other side of the equation, our subject matter experts. This was a layer of review that we added following the February 2025 exam. Subject matter experts are tasked purely with confirming the legal accuracy of a question. Under the policy that the Supreme Court adopted, subject matter experts can come from pools of licensees, law school faculty, and California judges and justices. And the Supreme Court's policy added a definition for what they've set as a threshold for experience, that the policy kind of defines what's described as outstanding expertise in the subject area. This is all, again, additional requirements, enhanced requirements that came from the Supreme Court when the policy was approved. So as I mentioned, the application is now closed, but we're going to be finalizing that recruitment effort in the coming weeks and month. The second update I have is about our communication with applicants leading up to this February bar examination. At the end of this week, we will be sending out our 6th and final bar exam countdown email for this upcoming exam. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize what we think to be the effectiveness of this countdown email series. Just looking at some preliminary data, we see that 2/3 of all applicants open each email. It's one of the most successful ways that we can reach applicants. Of course, a lot of the information that is provided, all the information that's provided exists elsewhere, whether it's our admittance ticket bulletin that all applicants receive, whether it's our specific exam web pages and information about using laptops. All of it exists elsewhere, but the countdown email is an opportunity for us to present the most time-sensitive and timely information in front of applicants when they need it, and it's worked very well. The last thing I just want to say about this is we just recently switched to an email platform that's going to allow us to kind of better serve applicants when they're contacting us for kind of customer service related issues. Because of that, this platform creates automatic lists of applicants for each email to be served based on the list of applications that we've received. I've heard from others who are not applicants, whether it's faculty or others who have previously received these emails. They're not currently receiving them because of this platform switch. We are going to look into expanding how this new platform works. But in the meantime, we always post these bar exam emails on a dedicated web page for bar exam emails. So I just want to take an opportunity to remind everyone, you can find that page if you go to the State Bar's website, which is calbar.ca.gov. There's a search box in the top right corner, and you can just type in bar exam emails. And we post the exact language PDF version of every email that we send in the bar exam emails series. Those are my updates.
Thank you, Cody. I believe we're now on to item 2.4, the report on posting of updated testing accommodation rules.
Yes. Yes, so I just want to turn everyone's attention to the website that in December, the updated rules related to testing accommodations were posted. They were generally focused around clarifying and expanding the opportunities for automatic approvals when there had been similar approvals on prior high stakes exams. And in addition, the appeal schedule was also clarified. So we wanted to make sure that that was clear, not only to you, but also to your students and your applicants from your schools. There'll be an opportunity where we'll solicit deep dive questions from each school, but in order to get ready for that, we encourage you to take a look at the information that's up on the website right now, so that you can let us know what might be your specific questions as to policies for your school, or that your individual students and applicants can ask their questions as well. So that information is up on the website TA page right now. So if there are any general questions, I'd be happy to take them, and there'll be a time for more specific. Okay, thank you. At this point, I'll turn it over to Teresa to talk to largely the audience and returning members about how to apply to serve on the Law School Council.
Hi, everyone. Just a quick announcement. So the applications for membership of the Law School Council are now open on our webpage. So if you go to the Law School Council webpage on the State Bar's website, you will see a link that will take you to the application. Those applications will be open until June 30th of this year. And just as a reminder to the public or anyone who's listening, deans and representatives from California ABA law schools are qualified to apply. So if you think that you are qualified and interested, please do send us an application or spread the word to someone you know who might be interested. Any questions on the application process from this committee? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Now we are moving on to item 3.1, which will be approval of the December 11th, 2025 Law School Council open session minutes. I'd like to direct the members' attentions to the minutes and to please let us know if there are any questions or corrections that they have for the minutes from that meeting. At this point, I'd like to ask for a motion to move the minutes for a vote.
Motion to move the minutes for a vote.
Thank you. And is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Thank you. Teresa, can you please take a vote?
Bakshian,
Approve.
Basic,
Approve.
Harrington,
Approve.
Kenyon is not present. Miragabi,
Approved.
Sassy,
Approve.
and Edidam.
Approve.
All right, with 6 yeses and 0 nos, the motion carries.
Thank you. We are now moving along at a good pace. Item number 4.1, discussion of the Law School Council work plan recommended to the Board of Trustees by the Committee of Bar Examiners. And I'll turn that over to Natalie in a second, but I do have a comment from Devin Kenyon to read before we start that. So this is from Devin Kenyon, member of the Law School Council. Dear colleagues, I'm unable to join you for the February 18th Law School Council meeting, but wanted to contribute to the ongoing discussion of the adopted work plan, item 4.1, hence this public comment. At the last Law School Council meeting, when we were discussing this topic, I raised the suggestion that the quality assurance process for the California bar exam should be publicly demonstrated. After the February 2025 administration, it is clear that the past quality assurance processes were not effective, and that the state bar must adopt a new process to win back the confidence of the exam takers and the public at large. I'm gratified that there have been important steps taken to improve the validity of exam content and that promises have been made to ensure the editorial integrity of the exam. That said, there was a significant legal error in the July 2025 written exam, which has been acknowledged in the essay questions posted on the State Bar's website. This mistake, which would be noticed by nearly anyone with the legal expertise demanded of those people sitting for the California bar exam, reinforces how important the quality assurance process is, including simply hiring a knowledgeable copy editor. I do not know how this suggestion would or could be integrated into the work plan proposal and have since discussed with the bar staff that the issue should still be a priority, even if not explicitly addressed in that document. I urge the members of this council and the leadership on the Committee of Bar Examiners and the Board of Trustees to demand a public demonstration of those processes before the July 2026 administration. Exam takers and the public must know the process is currently working to believe that the new process that may be used with the Kaplan drafted materials is credible. Transparency is a necessary step in earning the trust that was so badly damaged last year. Sincerely, Devin Kenyon. And that is the comment.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. And I'll put the work plan up in a moment, but before I do, I just want to describe the process and then also loop in the comments from Dean Kenyon, who is a member but could not join on this particular day. So as you know, when you met last time, you looked at the Committee of Bar Examiners draft work plan to determine which of the items on the work plan could benefit from feedback from the Law School Council or about which the Law School Council had questions. So that feedback was returned to the Committee of Bar Examiners at their January meeting. They looked at their own work plan as well as the work plan for the Law School Council, largely created by this body's feedback. And they are sending the recommendations largely directly as you posed them to the Board of Trustees to consider actually over the next 2 days at their meeting. And with respect to the comment from Chair Kenyon, I met with him and the plan is to bring you the information that he is requesting. When he highlighted it during the talk, he highlighted it against an exam security section and QC that takes place enclosed for the Committee of Bar Examiners. So there is a further item down on the page, which I'll show you, where this information can fit. So this is information that we can go ahead and bring to you. And the work plan is always a living document. So for example, when we met last time, it was believed at that point that the Committee of Bar Examiners and Trustees may choose a single point forward to recommend to the Supreme Court regarding the bar exam. And then this committee would look at what comes next. In fact, they are looking at two possible items, and so we've proactively adjusted the work plan to give you the opportunity to discuss and comment on the two options under consideration. So this work plan will be available up on the agenda. It was also posted on the January CBE agenda, and we'll be checking in as to where it's been or where you may choose to modify or request a modification as we go forward. The format should be familiar to what you saw last time. Last time it was a full format, all of the CBE items, and you were going through each one and choosing where there might be a law school counsel possibility. But here now it's been narrowed to those you selected, and we'll just put it up so that everyone can see.
Natalie, while you're bringing that up, just
Yeah.
one small point of clarification. The work plan is actually going to be considered at the board's executive committee meeting on February 26th. So I think you mentioned the next few days. It's actually going to be next week. We have a board executive committee meeting on the 26th, and then the board of trustees meets on the 26th and 27th. So it'll only
Oh,
be next
thank
week.
you.
Yeah, just for those who are tracking all the meetings.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. And so if you look at the agenda for that meeting, you'll see all of the work plans for the various committees. You'll see the CBE's overall work plan, the Law School Council committee work plan, and then the companion CS BAR's work plan for accredited and registered schools as well. So it uses the similar format to the CBE work plan, as you can see here. And are you able to read this at this size?
That's better, Natalie.
Okay. So the items that you identified last time are here. So some are ongoing. So for example, receiving updates that are relevant from the Board of Trustees, the legislature, the Committee of Bar Examiners, admission statistics as they are posted. One of the things we'll be bringing to you is that we'll be slightly changing the format of the statistics in the coming months. And so that'll be agendized for future discussions. This committee does not specifically comment on the budget, but we do keep you updated on the updated fees and have come to this body for feedback at times. And then let's slide down. Great, perfect. That's good. And then a couple of things. As the choices narrow for the future bar exam, you'll be looking at the necessary steps for executing these steps. Today, you'll be talking about those two possibilities under consideration. And then further, next item, evaluating whether to phase out handwriting options for non-TA applicants. It is unclear whether or not that will happen, but if it is proposed, then it would be proposed with the required 2-year notice period to law schools and also to the testing pool. So that will be on a further item. Let's go on to the next page. Perfect. As we get updates from the scientific heads of the various programs that we've been doing that are bar exam prep complementary programs, we'll be bringing those to you. I know that you met with Chris Evans in December. It's nice to have that direct audience and to have him receive your feedback and questions about the peak performance study that's being conducted out of Stanford. And we hope that that created some additional interest in your schools and hopefully brought more applicants. We see the applicants to that program growing greatly from exam to exam at this point, and that program's going on right now. Also, for a long time now, the State Bar has been working on strategies to diversify the grader pool. This is not a new agenda item at all for the State Bar, but it was new to the Law School Council. So we'll be keeping you updated about those items as well as the RFPs that are out for selection of various vendors. Let's go on to the next page. And then here, this is a general topic regarding bar exam development, bar exam administration. So this is the area where we would loop in anything that would fit within this category, including any questions you might have about the drafting and QC process for questions for the bar exam, also for the first year law students exam as well. So these are the things that are slated for the for the Law School Council going forward. This is the format we'll be using going forward, and you can see the timing when you'll be discussing each of these items. Next meeting taking place for the Law School Council in June. Are there any questions about the work plan? Okay, thank you. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Cody.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad we are ahead of time because I think this is kind of the meat of the meeting, and that means we have plenty of time to talk about this. Let me get my slides up here. There it is. Okay. So I want to start with just some background, just to re-establish kind of how we got to where we're at today with regard to the ongoing discussions about the future bar examination. I want to just do a quick background. Then I want to kind of synthesize some of the stakeholder priorities and principles that have been received through a number of sources. And then I want to go to discussion, and I've teed up maybe 4 or 5 questions that I think from my vantage point would be helpful for us to understand. But after that, I want to open up the floor to just an open dialogue as well. And we've got plenty of time, I think, to do that. And actually, before I do that, just 1 second, let me, I think my headset's making a noise here. Okay. So let's start with that background. As I mentioned, there's been a number of discussions between the Committee of Bar Examiners and the board that have led us here today. Here's a just quick summary. On the left-hand side, I'm going to identify some of the meetings where information was added to the discussion or considerations were made. But on the right-hand side, I'm spotlighting those meetings where kind of the menu of options that the board and committee had to consider for the future of the exam evolved over time and ultimately led to the 2 options that we're going to discuss today. So just to go through that timeline, just to remind everyone, in May 2025, the board adopted their preliminary guiding principles to help them further discuss the options for future bar exam development and administration. Some of those principles included doing it right is more important than doing it fast or cheap. The exam must be reliable and predictable, minimizing risks, ensuring the exam appropriately assesses for minimum competency, access, affordability, fairness, and equitability. And the list goes on. There's about a dozen or so principles, preliminary guiding principles that the board established and that the committee also adopted. By August 2025, there was a joint meeting of the Committee of Bar Examiners and the Board of Trustees. And at that meeting, the members were really discussing 3 high-level options. A bridge exam option, which would mean using questions developed under our contract with Kaplan until some new exam was ready in the future. Option 2 would be to adopt the National Conference of Bar Examiners next-gen uniform bar examination, and to be determined would be whether or not that a California-specific component should be added to that exam. And then the third option considered at that time is what we called the streamlined exam. It was multiple choice and performance test questions only, similar to what Nevada's adopted in their comprehensive licensing exam. And there were some outstanding questions related to what the final form of that should look like. At that August meeting, the Committee of Bar Examiners also established 2 new subcommittees, the Subcommittee on Examination Development and the Subcommittee on Examination Administration, which are tasked with overseeing the creation of content and delivery of future exams. In October and November 2025, the CB discussed these 3 options in more detail. And then by November 2025, the board was able to consider these options with some additional inputs. Namely, at that time, we had the results of a survey of California law school deans and some responses submitted by their faculty. And just some high-level trends that came out of that survey was that the ABA and California accredited law schools generally preferred adopting the next-gen bar exam, the next-gen UBE, and the unaccredited law schools generally preferred the streamlined exam that looked like what Nevada has adopted. From there, there was ongoing discussion, and by December 2025, excuse me. So, by 2025, December 2025, the CBE was presented with like a decision-making framework that helped them kind of sift through their priorities and the many different options that were placed in front of them. That decision-making framework that was provided at that time was required because at this point, the set of options was kind of further fleshed out to include all of the sub-decisions necessary. So by December 2025, the committee is actually considering 7 options. There's 3 that are related to developing a new California bar exam, consistent with what the Supreme Court had directed the State Bar to explore in October 2024. In that category, there was an option to use Kaplan questions as a bridge. There's an option to use next-gen UBE with a California component or without a California component as a bridge to get to that new exam. There was, under the streamlined exam similar to Nevada, several options. Would it be multiple choice and performance test questions only? Or would there be some additional assessment of other skills, perhaps through a separate online module? And then, of course, for adopting the next-gen UBE, would there be a California component or not? So by December, the committee and the board had really had the opportunity to not only think about these 3 high-level options, but start to discuss within these 3 high-level options all the different kind of permutations. Come January 2026, our last meeting, it was a joint meeting of the Committee of Bar Examiners and the board. The members had an opportunity to review extensive data collected from a number of stakeholders that from the months prior to that meeting. We had the law school dean survey that I mentioned, an additional survey of licensees and applicants. There was a survey of the committee and board members themselves. At that meeting, there was a roundtable discussion with law school deans. There was a presentation from Kaplan Exam Services as the State Bar's vendor. And there was another presentation kind of on some of the strategic considerations as it related to the State Bar's level of control over different factors to help the board determine kind of which factors they could have an impact on if they chose a certain option. Out of that meeting, with all of this information in mind and months of discussion behind it, 2 actions were taken. The Committee of Bar Examiners recommended that the board pursue adopting the next-gen UBE without adding a California-specific component. Upon receiving that recommendation from the CBE, the board, not prepared yet to narrow it down to a single option, directed staff to conduct further research into 2 options. And it's those 2 options that are going to be the focus of today's discussion. So option 1, I'm just going to use a brief descriptive term just throughout this presentation. I'm going to call it use of Kaplan. But what the first option really is to use questions that are developed under our contract with Kaplan, along with the questions that the State Bar already has in its item bank. And that means multiple choice questions, essays, and performance tests to administer an exam that looks like the exam as it is today, starting as early as February 2028. to do this, the State Bar, with the questions developed under contract with Kaplan and using the processes that have been established, content validation panel, subject matter expert, and our existing reviewers, the exam development and grading team and our PT drafting team, collectively, the State Bar would manage that and be responsible for developing the questions for this exam. Now, this option came out of members of the board and committee, their interest in being able to observe the initial administrations of the next gen UBE before having to make a final choice. And so this option is intended to allow time to confirm that the technology supporting the next gen UBE is able to support a large load of test takers, that platform does not pose an unacceptable technological risk, and to review any performance data that's available after a few administrations of that exam. So the use of Kaplan option is meant to be, at least initially, a shorter term decision to allow the board and committee and decision makers an opportunity to revisit the next gen UBE after some of this data and information is available. Now, this choice does not preclude the creation of a California-specific exam in the future. That could be a decision that's made in the future, and we've been, I think, honest up front that if that is a decision that's made, we believe it would take a 5 to 10 year development window to do that right. And this option doesn't preclude a choice in the future to adopt the next gen UBE. Of course, that's the purpose of gathering that information. If that decision were to be made in the future, we have multiple requirements related to the amount of notice that needs to be required. So if that choice were to be made in the future, we don't see next gen being administered any earlier than July 2031. The second option that the board directed staff to research what is adopting the next gen UBE without a California component. And because of our notice requirement, that could be the approach administered beginning in July 2028. Just as a reminder, the general design of the exam, there's 120 standalone multiple choice questions. There are 3 performance test questions, and then there are these 6 integrated item sets in which one set of facts and information is used to respond to a set of multiple choice questions, short answer, and medium answer written response questions. Under this approach, the State Bar obviously purchases the full exam, and there's no longer any State Bar led or managed development of bar exam questions. And this too would not preclude the State Bar from developing a California specific exam in the future under that 5 to 10 year development window if that choice is made in the future. So what I want to do now that I've explained kind of the options, I want to just reiterate or synthesize some of the top priorities that were shared by our members as well as different stakeholders, and then I'll get to the discussion piece. So let me start with some of the initial guiding principles that were adopted by the board and committee leading up to the January meeting. And as I mentioned, there's about a dozen. But in December 2025, when we had a survey of the CBE and board members, we asked them to help identify the top 5 most important of these preliminary guiding principles. And what came out of that was this list of 5, that the exam must be accessible, affordable, fair, and equitable, that doing it right is more important than doing it fast or cheap, that it's critical to deliver a reliable and predictable exam, that the exam must assess minimum competence to practice law in California, and they retained the preliminary guiding principle to consider both remote and in-person exams. We also asked that the members identify, as they're considering 2 exam options, or at that time, multiple exam options, what factors should drive the selection. And there was a long list of factors, but again, we asked them to list their top 5, and what came out of that The top 5 factors were alignment with knowledge, skills, and abilities required for entry-level practice in California, assessment of California law and competence, cost and access considerations, long-term continuity, and focus on applied skill. So what we have is a set of guiding principles, and then we have specific factors about an option that have been prioritized, at least preliminarily, and that's helping the members guide their discussion. So to kind of connect the thread to the 2 options that are currently under discussion, this is not an extensive list, but this is just some examples of how each option might align with the CB and the board's top preliminary principles. So under the use of Kaplan model, the state bar retains full control of the exam, which means it can pursue its own equity initiatives. Using Kaplan questions for now allows time to assess the technology supporting the next-gen UBE. That is prioritizing what the board and CB described as doing it right over doing it fast. This option provides the state bar the flexibility to explore future remote exams or to explore other delivery approaches that could make the exam more affordable. And of course, under this model, the state bar would still test California specific law. And to whatever extent that one believes that that's necessary to measure minimum competency, that would be retained under this model. Under the adopting next-gen UBE model, the content and skills that are tested on the next-gen UBE do substantially overlap with the content and skills identified in California's practice analysis, meaning the exam is likely still a good tool for assessing minimum competency and the knowledge, skills, and abilities required for entry-level practice in California. Of course, I think that's an area where further discussion amongst the members is needed, but I think there's an argument to be made there. The exam has been designed to place greater emphasis on skills. If we were to choose the other option, which is to retain the exam kind of as it is today, there really wouldn't be a change in the level or the amount of memorization needed to perform well on the exam. For the next-gen UB, this is something that's been kind of designed from the get-go. Staff were at the January beta test for the next-gen UBE. They observed a number of accessibility features that are built right into the platform. And by the NCB's own account, they have user experience experts that have helped design some of these features. So to the extent that meets the accessibility priorities or principles of the board and CBE, these are elements that are already part of the platform. And then regarding the long-term continuity principle or factor that was prioritized, this option is a longer-term decision just based on the fact that using the Kaplan questions option is meant to allow the board and CB to revisit next-gen at a later date. And so, built into that is an assumption that it's a shorter-term decision. That's not built into this approach. This would be a decision to administer next-gen UBE unless and until there's a future decision to develop a California exam on that 5 to 10 year window. So that was the list of board CB priorities alongside the options that are on the table today. But I wanted to share just some of the stakeholder priorities. And if you revisit the January joint meeting agenda, we've provided all of the survey data. So there's a lot more to look at as far as all of the stakeholder priorities. But I want to try to synthesize just a couple of top trends that I think are interesting for this discussion. Generally, the applicants that were surveyed preferred next-gen UBE. Among the top factors that applicants listed that may explain this preference, score portability was a top factor. Of course, this could allow applicants to pursue licensure and career opportunities in other jurisdictions. So that's likely appealing. Another factor was alignment with most jurisdictions. We've heard from, I think, even members of this body that there are benefits to be able to use the national market of bar preparation materials and just to benefit from a larger community of test takers. That could explain why this is a top factor. And they also listed cost considerations. And I think it's important to note that the State Bar has not yet completed a full analysis of the cost associated with each option. And certainly under the approach to use Kaplan, the State Bar would have the flexibility to pursue cost-saving measures, while adopting Next-Gen UBE means that the State Bar is largely, the fees are largely driven by the NCBE. So while cost consideration is a top factor, I think there's still a lot of information for stakeholders to receive on that front, and the State Bar is still working on that. Among licensees, there was a preference for California-specific exams. Some of the top factors for this group was the assessment of California law and competence and the long-term continuity of the exam. Again, I think, at least initially, using the use of Kaplan does ensure some continuity with the existing exam, because the exam would not change, but that option inherently is meant to revisit the Next-Gen Bar exam or the Next-Gen UBE after a few administrations, and so it is a shorter term singular decision. So just an interesting note about this long-term continuity preference. And then we had, as I mentioned, the law school deans at a roundtable, and there was also the survey. Out of those discussions, the ABA and CALS did prefer adopting Next-Gen UBE. The ABA and CALS had many of the same preferences or top factors under consideration as the board and CBE. The only two that were different is that the ABA and CALS listed professional test developers and portability of exam scores among their top 5 factors, instead of assessment of California law and competence and focus on applied skills. This likely reflects some of the feedback we received from leaders of these schools. There was a lack of confidence in the State Bar to develop exams. That certainly was a message that we received from some ABA and CALS deans. And of course, when it comes to score portability, the possible benefits for their own students. Lastly, because the board and CBA have retained among their guiding principles at least a consideration of both remote and in-person testing, we have been asking for, in our post-exam surveys for some time, what a test taker's preference would be on a future bar exam. And we have seen a stated preference for remote exams steadily decrease since February 2024, when it was at 64%, through July 2025, where it hit a low of 29%. Okay, so that was a lot of information in the background. I want to move into the discussion. As I mentioned, I've got a few questions I plan to tee up, but we can take the discussion and into other directions, and I'm happy to receive any other feedback, or this body can explore other avenues as well. So just to kickstart the discussion, we are interested in understanding your perspective on to what extent you believe these options, the 2 options under consideration, accomplish the CB and board's top 5 preliminary guiding principles. And because of your unique perspectives, also to what extent you believe these options address other priorities that are important to faculty or students that maybe we haven't covered today. So I'll stop there with this first set, and I'll open the floor for discussion.
A hand from Susan.
I feel like I always go first, so let me start with an apology for that. Any of the rest of you who want to go first can feel free. But I have many thoughts, and let me just share a few to get us started. The first is, I certainly hope that someone from the State Bar is going to emphasize to both the CBE and Board of Trustees that the folks who run the LSAT have found remote cheating to be so rampant as to announce that they are ending remote testing. So this entire focus on making sure that we ensure flexibility for remote testing flies in the face of current technology abilities and flies in the face of what other large national testing is doing. So I think it is time that we recognize that the flexibility of remote testing cannot and should not drive this decision. We should let that go and focus on what's more important. And what's more important is stability. And I think most everyone in this room who knows me and has heard me give public comment at most of these meetings knows it is giantly surprising, to myself included, that I am here to say it's got to be the next gen exam. We have to get out of the business of writing an exam that cannot keep pace with today's needs and changes. This is no critique of the State Bar staff. I enjoy working closely with all of you. This is a critique of the future, and it is a critique of exam preparation and administration and the need for change. So I think we have to embrace the next gen. I was deeply troubled at the joint CBE and Board of Trustees meeting by the excessive emphasis by many members, particularly on the Board of Trustees, about, but we've already paid for Kaplan, as if this somehow justifies settling for subpar licensure in our state because we've already invested the money. It's absurd, and we should no longer be focused on that. We should be focused on what is the best option going forward. The best option going forward is next gen without a California component. That was made clear through the Dean's Roundtable, and you don't see all of the California ABA deans agree on a lot of things. They agree on this. I think that we have to weigh that heavily. And I think we have to stop talking about bridge options. The idea that we will do something for a couple years and then something else ignores the reality of law school curriculum, which is a 3 to 4 year adventure, 5 years for anyone who gets off track for any reason. So, but right now, we all have first year students who have no idea what their licensure exam looks like. If they are a traditional third year student, they are taking an exam in July of 2028. They are about to complete their first year in the next couple of months with no idea of whether or not that coverage was appropriate to the bar exam and whether or not they are being tested in the proper format. The move to next gen requires radical law school curricular change. And along those lines, we're already a year behind. We should have already started. This idea that we will go back and forth and then at some point do Kaplan, at some point do next gen, at some point do California 5 to 10 year plan, it's got to stop. We have got to adopt a reasonable plan, stick with it, and create some stability. This is going to embarrass our profession. You don't see doctors, dentists, you don't see contractors, you don't see anybody who has a state provided license, pharmacists. They don't engage in this kind of constant upheaval. It doesn't look good, and we can do better.
Susan, I was typing away notes here, so I realized I was on mute and you probably heard my typing, but I appreciate all that feedback. I also appreciate that I think you've, in all of your comments, you said you've enjoyed working with us. We appreciate that. And so the comments we receive here are not personal. It's part of getting to the best option moving forward. But thank you for that. That was very extensive. Mary, I see your hands raised as well.
If it's not Susan talking, it's me. So we don't plan it. We just have things to say. So what I wanted to, two ideas that I just wanted to share. And one, and I've said it before, but I would, especially in light of seeing the joint Board of Trustee and Committee of Bar Examiners meeting and some of the feedback that has come from a variety of stakeholders, I do think there's a mistaken impression that the California exam option, which in this case would be the Kaplan, sticking in that direction for a bit, is somehow testing California law in great measure. It is currently not doing that. It would be a smidgy bit more than next gen, but there seems to be a lack of understanding by many of the folks that as the bar exam is currently constituted in California or any other state, we are testing bar law, common law murder, not the statute in California. And so, with very few exceptions, the content is not currently capturing California law. And I'm sorry, the exam. Did I say statute? The exam. So I think when the licensed attorneys are saying, hey, we want everyone to know California law, it's not happening now. And I'm not sure that that is clear to the folks who are making these decisions. So I think that that is something that they should know. And the only thing I wanted to say, because I just want to say it, and I think as the committee of bar examiners, the board of trustees, and ultimately the Supreme Court are making decisions, I would like to share that I do think the costs of preparing for the exam will be greater with next gen. The NCBE is notoriously stingy with practice materials. I noticed I saw, it must be for the next meeting, there was the next meeting, who has the next meeting? Board of Trustees, Committee of Bar Examiners, but there was a big chart there with a whole lot of information. It was a draft version that you all
Yep.
created. You know
For
what
the
I'm talking about?
subcommittee on exam development, which is this Friday. Yep.
Thank you. I knew it. I knew you'd
A lot
know.
of different meetings. It's okay. I forgive you because there is a lot of meetings.
There's a lot going on, but there were some points made in that presentation that seem to imply, and I think you even mentioned, Cody, that seem to imply that somehow going national is going to be better economically and make it more affordable. I don't think that is true. I don't think that's, given the options, a reason not to go with next gen. I think it said that there was some free question samples available. They are de minimis. So there is no way somebody could actually prepare for the exam using the very scant practice materials that have been released, and probably, if we follow with how the NCBE normally releases practice materials thus far, they are really stingy with it, and you have to pay a substantial amount. The law schools will have to pay a substantial amount to get access to practice materials. It's going to cost everybody more money. I say that just so that it's said, because I still think it's unfortunately, the better option, between going with Kaplan and for all the reasons Susan just identified for us. I agree. And that's probably why all the ABA deans are all in agreement on those points. But those are just two things I wanted to point out. I do think, in the spirit of full disclosure, the folks making the decision should not be under the mistaken impression that somehow it is going to make it more affordable if we go with next gen. That's not true.
Yeah, and Mayor, if I could ask, so just to give everyone the context, there was a meeting on Friday of the subcommittee on examination development. They are going, it's my last slide after our discussion, but they are going to be considering a draft kind of risk benefit analysis of the risks and benefits for the state bar and examinees. It's a preliminary draft. There's a lot more work that needs to be done on it. With the points that you mentioned about kind of the bar preparation material, I think, and we'll need to make sure this is clear. I think the benefit we were trying to articulate there is less about cost and just more about the fact that there will be access to much more preparation material out there. And so I'm curious to get your input. If the option is to continue to use Kaplan, we will reissue and QC new study guides. But absent that, unless there's some third-party company that decides they want to create materials for the California market specifically, there won't be a product out there specifically designed for the California exam that we create. And so I hear you, next gen materials will be more costly, The alternative is maybe a lack of options of materials out there. And is that concerning to you?
It is, and I'm glad that you brought that up, Cody, because here's the thing, and this kind of bleeds into one of the other points that I know you guys have tried to beef up the quality assurance, going with Kaplan, and you've added layers of review, but notably, the what is missing is people who are experts in the bar exam itself. In fact, those folks seem to be precluded from participating because of their familiarity with NCBE products and things of that nature. So with bar preparation, the more like the practice materials are to the actual bar exam, the easier it is, or the more replicable that experience is going to be when folks are practicing. So what's going to end up happening whenever you have a different authorship of questions, even if Kaplan takes over rewriting essay questions, you can tell. I can tell a Kaplan question from a Barbary question from a Themis question because there's a different voice to it, if that makes sense. And so if Kaplan is in charge of all of this and they're not required to release sufficient practice materials, what is available will be what was on the old exam that was drafted by totally different people. Who that is going to, in my opinion, hurt the most severely are the folks who have to try harder to pass the exam, where they need more reps, they need more practice, they need more accuracy in their practice, and they learn incrementally from doing that. And so I'm very concerned without having any QA people in the process who are actually bar exam people, that those questions are going to look like what is available for students to practice with. I think there's going to be enough of a gap that we're going to see some real divergence in passing scores with different populations. Y'all may agree or not.
Thank you for that.
If I could just follow up to Mary's point, I think she's absolutely right. Next Gen is likely to cost more because the model for Next Gen tends to be that jurisdictions simply take the Next Gen expense and pass it to applicants. And so in that regard, it is likely to be higher than California's past history, though with our recent hikes in the last few years, I'm not sure that that is as significant as a gap as we might have thought it would be. But I think it's important to recognize that if there are no California study materials, because it's Kaplan drafted, it's unique to California only, and there's nothing for students to study with, that will end up costing students far more than how much more expensive Next Gen is to an applicant or to the state bar. To give you a very simple example, I recommend that my students do 2,000 to 2,500 practice multiple choice questions to prepare for the MBE today. That's not an unusual number. It's a number a lot of you use. I probably stole it from Mary's last book. But that is very much the kind of range of practice questions you are talking about needing to do. If we go with Next Gen, there will be that level of materials out there in all of the various bar providers and from Next Gen, although I agree with Mary, they charge far too much for both applicants and institutions to access these materials, particularly when claiming to be a nonprofit. That set aside, I think that we would be looking at, if we're thinking that Kaplan is going to save money in the long run, it is not. The state bar is going to have to get in the business of providing a lot of additional extra practice study materials because no one else is going to do it. The bar review providers are going to go to the Next Gen. They've already gone to the Next Gen, and there isn't going to be anybody who's particularly interested in a single state market.
Thoughts or questions from our other council members? Yeah, Carla.
Yeah, I mean, I just echo both what Mary and Susan said, and I mentioned this in our last law school council meeting when we had that really brief discussion period. But I think stability is the biggest thing. Like, you know, I'm teaching a 1L elective right now, and I'm like, I don't know what your bar exam is going to look like. I have no idea if this is what, you know, how you're writing an essay for the exam. So I think not only that stability, but also the sooner we can get a decision. I know that's nothing that you all have control over. And in the last meeting, I think they said if they do next gen, they have to decide by like May because of the notice period. If they decide to go use of Kaplan, it doesn't have to be until next January, correct? So I guess first, just a clarification on, I guess, the latest that we'll find out about that. And then, you know, again, just reinforcing the need for that stability. And then I know that you probably all don't have an answer to give, but I know that cost considerations was listed as one of the reasons to move to next gen. And so I'm just wondering if it looks like it will be less the actual exam cost for a student to take than the California exam is now. You might not have an answer to that. I know you said that.
Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, Carly, I don't want to speak too early on that. We at that January joint meeting, we produced a very, very preliminary cost assessment, and it has essentially no numbers. What it has is kind of the scale of increase a little or increase a lot cost, and or the opposite, decrease a little, decrease a lot cost, just for the members to kind of visually get a sense of what among our bar exams expenses, what we imagine would be going up or going down if we looked at these options compared to the July 2025 exam. But we, as part of the report that we have to produce, and I'll explain a little bit more about that at the end of the presentation, but we are putting together this preliminary report because it's required by the Supreme Court, and there will be a more explicit cost analysis included. That part hasn't been completed yet, so I don't want to speak too early about that. As far as the timeline, though, as I mentioned earlier, if the well, let me start with the decision deadline that we've really put in front of our members. There are two notice requirements. If we just change the vendor that produces the multiple choice questions for the exam, there's an 18-month notice requirement. If we change the exam in a way that that modifies the way that students need to prepare for the exam substantially, there's a 2-year notice requirement. And so what we have placed in front of the decision makers is a decision needs to be made or a recommendation to the court needs to be made at the May board meeting so that the Supreme Court can issue an order about which way we're going by July 2026, so that we have enough time to make the 2-year notice ahead of the July 2028 bar exam, because in July 2028, we won't have, the MBE will not be available. We have to have a new exam at that point. If the court chooses the option that I called use Kaplan, that would just require the 18-month notice requirement. So that could allow us to administer that exam as early as February 2028. If they choose to go with the second option to adopt next-gen UBE, that would fall under the 2-year notice requirement. So that exam could be administered as early as July 2028. So that's a sense of the timeline. But because of the 2-year requirement, and because we're bumping up against the MBE no longer being available in July 2028, we really have set a deadline that the board has to make a recommendation in May, so that the court has time to issue that order in July of this year.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Cody, do you have any details or updates to lend with regard to the competency portion, if that were to be entertained as an additional California component?
Yeah, let me try to speak to this in a way that kind of captures all of the possibilities. So let me start with kind of the highest level description of what is being considered first, and I'll drill in. Because the next gen UBE is a day and a half, there is a half day on the second day of the bar exam in which a jurisdiction can test its own materials. What the board and the committee were considering was, should there be a high stakes exam component that tests California specific law? And if it's a high stakes exam component, it likely would be part of the second day of the exam, because that's when we have our proctors and test sites and all of that. Alternatively, this exists in other jurisdictions like New York and Maryland. They have a a state specific component, but it's more about testing or assessing an applicant's familiarity or exposure to state specific topics. So it can be something that is completed separately, online. What we had also discussed is perhaps it's like an online module that looks like we have something called the new attorney training. And so there's an online module that people go to complete several assessments when they become licensed. So on the table were a couple of different options: an exam-like option, or a one of these kind of familiarity options that's not like a high stakes exam. What I think is where there's maybe room for debate is how people perceive the need, or what is necessary to measure minimum competency to practice law as an entry-level attorney in California. And I think we saw that some stakeholders believe that it's necessary that you demonstrate knowledge of California specific law. And there are others who believe, and communicate through these surveys, that meeting the requirements of the NCB exam and the national practice analysis sufficiently measures your ability to demonstrate your lawyering skills, and California specific laws may be less important. So yeah, that's a lot of information, but that's kind of the different pieces and considerations that were on the table when this was being discussed.
I very much appreciate that. And is there any, I would say, inclination as to whether that be more of a testing component versus a clinical or practicum component out in the field?
An actual clinical component is, I think, was very quickly maybe not considered by the board and CB, just because of the maybe the inability to scale it appropriately in California. So at the end of 2025, we had the Nevada State Bar folks come and speak to the board and committee about their comprehensive licensure exam, and they have a supervised practice component, and we're very much advocating for the benefits of doing that. Later, I think some members expressed just some concerns that may not work here in California because of our large the number of applicants that we have.
Thank you for that feedback. So if I'm understanding you correctly, the second option of working towards something California specific would really be in an examination format.
I think it would be either the exam format or some
learning
separate
module
assessment that you can do, outside of the typical bar exam, administration, either remote, like probably online, and maybe modular based. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Carly, I see your hands raised.
Hey, sorry, I also just wanted to clarify with the adopting next gen, the option 2. You mentioned that it doesn't preclude California from still down the road creating its own exam. So either option includes that, just to clarify.
Yes, and I didn't go even further back in the background, but what's been hanging over all of this is that the Supreme Court directed the State Bar in October 2024 to pursue its own exam with new subject areas and skills.
Right.
So yes, neither of these options would prevent a decision at a later date to pursue something like that, or maybe exactly what the court ordered. But to do that right is a much longer development window, and we estimate 5 to 10 years.
Okay. So in that sense, it could be that next gen ends up being like a bridge exam. Like a longer term bridge exam.
A longer term bridge. We didn't describe it as a bridge because in our different options that have existed, I think we really thought the bridge as being kind of shorter term. I think to Susan's point earlier, I think she would recommend we take that future California exam completely off the table. But yeah, I guess in that sense, yes, there's still an opportunity to bridge towards something, but it maybe just a term of a different word choice, I guess, just to articulate that one's a longer term selection, the other's a shorter term decision.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. And Susan, I see your hand raised as well.
And yes, Cody, that's correct. I object to any and all bridge options as just a fundamental misunderstanding of law school education in the current environment, and that it is unfair to ask students to incur the kind of debt they incur to invest 3 to 4 years of their life with hey, at the end of it all, there's be some kind of a licensing test for you. We have to stop that. That cannot be a way forward. But what I also wanted to add in hopes that the State Bar staff could help the Board of Trustees and the CBE with some better understanding is that there be some correction about what they think about the blue ribbon recommendations that led to the Supreme Court order, that there is a fair level of misunderstanding from the comments on both Board of Trustees and Committee of Bar Examiners, that somehow they believe the Blue Ribbon Commission rejected the next gen exam knowing what's available today. I was on the Blue Ribbon Commission. It's been over for a very long time. We knew nothing. We rejected it at the time because the NCBE was simply unable to give us any information. I don't think the CBE and the Board of Trustees fully understand that is why the Blue Ribbon Commission did not recommend next gen. The Blue Ribbon Commission, given today's information, might reach very different conclusions. And I think that has not been very well communicated to them, in part because obviously no one from the Blue Ribbon Commission currently sits on those bodies. So it could be helpful if some additional context was given both to the age of the commission's recommendations and also to the fact that the court's order was based on all of that old information. And the court acted over a year after the Blue Ribbon Commission sent its recommendations. So everything is very, very old and without a lot of information that's available today. So I think it would be helpful if the CBE and the Board of Trustees were given a little context so that when people make representations, actually, Ryan Harrison, who's on the Board of Trustees, was on the Blue Ribbon Commission. But I think he's the only one left. I don't believe there's anyone currently on CBE. But whether it's a small number or a zero number, it's a low number. And it would be helpful, I think, for the State Bar personnel to talk about the age of the Blue Ribbon recommendations, the lack of information available then that's available today, and to avoid letting the CBE and the Board of Trustees being sort of misguided in what they think the Supreme Court is telling them to do today versus what the Supreme Court was reacting to a very old Blue Ribbon Commission.
Susan, noted on the second point, but if I could go back to the first point just to ask maybe a question that would be helpful to us. The idea that a bridge exam is creating it creates a lot of uncertainty and confusion. I hear that. Do you think that is that if there is a decision made in the future that the exam will be changing in 5 to 10 years, that too creates confusion or uncertainty? Or I I want to make sure we understand kind of the timelines that are necessary to be able to make future decisions in a way that's not disruptive, I guess.
I think it does. I think the reality is we need to make a recommendation in May. The Supreme Court needs to act, and it needs to be our licensure for as long as possible. That we cannot have first of all, I think the 5-year window is ridiculous. I think the 10-year window is possibly more realistic. But the idea that you have people just sort of hanging on the edge, because law school is again 3 to 4 years, sometimes 5, that you're talking about people starting law school and finishing law school without knowing what their licensure exam looks like. And that is unforgivable in my personal opinion. So I think that you can't have a 5 to 10-year window. And I think the idea that it goes back to my general objection to bridge, that a bridge of any kind, even if it's the next gen for 5 years or 10 years, why would we do that? 10 years into the next gen, 10 years into better law school curriculum, better skills testing, less memorization. Why would we go backwards and create our own exam at that point? That doesn't make any sense. And also, I was deeply troubled by the Board of Trustees, and many of them expressed that they did not feel ready to make a decision, did not want to make this decision. The idea that we will keep coming back to them on 5 to 10-year windows or any other bridge option, I think neglects what we saw firsthand at that last meeting, which is they do not want to make this decision. We're forcing them to make the decision. We have to force them to make the decision, but we need to make it. We need to go on a path and we need to stay there. And if the next gen exam isn't perfect, perhaps we can add a California component, much along the lines that Donna talked about at the last Board of Trustees meeting, where we have something that's available on demand, online, that you can study from the materials and take the questions, and that people will have an opportunity to prove their competency in California law if we need it. But again, back to Mary's point, we test so little California law now that the fact we're relying on surveys from licensed California attorneys, myself included, I am an active licensed California attorney, but I work in legal education, so I get it. I know how little California law is on the California bar exam in comparison to the entire exam. And we need to be honest about that and say that small component can be done in a different and better way. It would be better, in my assessment, to take that 5 or 10-year window and make some really great California on-demand offerings to supplement next gen if we need it. And if we don't need it, leave well enough alone and have a proper licensure exam that reflects the interstate nature of practice. The idea that we still have our own isolated exam is far out of date.
Yeah, I'll follow up on, so sorry, Carla. Just kind of what Susan and I think everybody's been emphasizing, just the amount of ramp up time to get the faculty, the curriculum, and everything in line with a new exam, get everybody moving in pulling in the same direction. That if there was to be a shift after 5 years, it's going to be difficult to get the machinery to then also adapt again. And every time you ask them to adapt to a major change, there's more likely to have people dragging behind. Our faculty right now is interested in the next gen, but they're saying this is going to be a huge undertaking for us in terms of our curriculum, our assessments. And if they were to make the change, the thought of coming back to them in 5 years saying we got to do it all over again would be a big challenge. So I'll pass it on to Carla.
Yeah, I was gonna agree with both Chris and Susan, just the undertaking of creating the curriculum and doing all that. I mean, 5 years, that's crazy. 10 years, I mean, still kind of crazy. And I really like the idea that Susan brought up, just spending that time creating a California component to the next gen if we need it. And that might be kind of a compromise with the current, I know there was a letter written by the current bar saying, we reject next gen, and they were really, they really wanted to stick with a California specific exam, but that might be something to offer, as kind of like an appeasement. Okay, California law specific component to the next gen. Again, agree, California law is not that heavily tested on the bar exam, but as kind of like, here is a piece, we're going to work on this. This is going to be incorporated into our exam at some point. I think that would be the only thing is an addition. I think asking to completely change from next gen to a California specific in 5 or 10 years would be hard. So.
Thank you, Carly. Mary.
Just going off of what Carly just said, as far as like offering maybe an alternative that would make those who are concerned about a California component feel that they've been heard. And I don't know the logistics of it, but why couldn't we do some sort of a self-study module with quizzes or something that becomes part of the MPRE? Because really it's the professional or I'm sorry, not the MPRE, the moral character. Sorry, I'm getting my things mixed up. But it's really the professional responsibility that where the California laws are different, that is probably what's going to be impactful for our new lawyers, where and there are some differences, but having some sort of a module that you make sure that everybody knows what their responsibilities are in California, and they do like a little self-study thing, would be a really reasonable alternative. It shouldn't be very expensive, and it would ensure that everybody practicing in California knows what their responsibilities are in a meaningful way. That's really the part of the California law, in my opinion, that really would matter for entry-level attorneys or even lawyers transferring in. And it seems like there's some other administrative way to address that without attaching it to a big high-cost bar exam with super heavy security and stuff like that. We don't need them to have it all memorized up front, but to introduce them to how the concepts are different in California so that they can be ethical practicing lawyers about obeying our rules in California seems a really reasonable solution that kind of addresses everybody's problems, I think. So just an idea.
Can I also open up a piece of a discussion that I think was raised in our what the State Bar has been hosting recently, our quarterly meetings with deans or law school staff and faculty. But I think there was a concern raised that continuing to use the Kaplan questions would make the efforts on campuses to prepare students for the bar exam complicated because of the unique student body of the members here, which are more students that are come from across the country. There are more students who will be actually seeking licensure in other jurisdictions. And I think there was a sentiment that bar prep programs would actually be preparing their students for, or at least creating programs around both options, next gen exam and whatever California is doing. But I don't think we had a chance to explore that in our last meeting here or in our public meeting. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because I think that was also an interesting piece that this group of members can speak to probably more than anyone else. Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, I'm actually doing a presentation on this and was just talking with my co-presenters yesterday, but we're doing that kind of a presentation for folks who do what we all do on how to tweak or completely overhaul your curriculum when you have students who have really varying needs for being properly prepared for the bar exam. And there's a lot of factors to concern. Some schools have a lot more students who are taking next gen versus California, but even, we have a pretty homogenous population here as far as, most folks take California. We don't have a lot of part-time students. We don't have distance learning or something where we get more next gen. And even coming up in 26, which is a very small next gen population, I've got, a next gen person, I've got UBE people, I've got California, of course. So we're in the position of having to provide a variety of resources to best prepare our students. And resources are at a premium. So what the presentation we're doing is about, like, how do you cover all the bases without hiring a bunch of extra people that you probably aren't going to have the budget to do, and still make sure everyone's properly prepared. All that to say, it's going to be a problem for sure. And even going back to like the resources thing, the the having to access practice materials for all these different exams, there's a cost associated with that as well, both money and time. That I think is going to probably end up with everybody being partially served, because the logical thing to do is going to be covering what both exams or all the exams cover, and kind of leaving them on their own for what's left. Anyways, it's a problem.
I think it might be fair to say, even for those of us that do have mostly California takers still, we still have mostly California takers. But what I have seen is that every year we get an uptick in more UBE, and now it will be next gen takers. So I think all of us have seen the number of non-California takers grow, and that's going in an upward trajectory. And I think that's fair for the state bar to represent to the Board of Trustees and Committee of Bar Examiners, that collectively all of us see an uptick in students doing both. And frankly, the curriculum requirements for getting them ready for next gen and the curriculum requirements for getting them ready for California with a Kaplan sort of in our traditional model are just grotesquely inconsistent. I mean, we either need to test in an essay format or we don't. And we either need to emphasize memorization or we need to emphasize skills. And it's not possible to do both.
Well, and I just want to say, point out, currently most law professors test primarily by essay. So we get some of them doing a few other things, but mostly it's essay. That's what we've all done. When we all went to school, that's what it was, and what the bar exam has always been. So next gen is a huge shift in testing style. It's going to take a heavy lift to get our professors to adjust how they're testing and assessing the students. And so I think that also goes to what we were talking about, like the idea that we would do an exam for a couple of years and then go do something else. Professors do not change that quickly or readily. And it, you know, as it is, there's going to be a window where the testing is mismatching how the exam is going to be at the end, that terminal exam of the bar exam. So I think that all of this is really challenging for the law schools to adjust to. I don't know that we've like as boldly said it that way. It's going to be a huge challenge.
Mayor, are some of the efforts to change how faculty are testing their students, or whatever would be necessary for a future next gen exam, even though a decision hasn't been made here, are there already initiatives happening at your school to start to prepare faculty? Are there changes already happening today?
I can start off the conversation, but you guys all should jump in. But I will say, I have been reluctant with my faculty to really get too far into it because it is uncertain. If I'm still going to have everything essay testing, I don't need to freak them out and have them start worrying about creating new exams and new formats. I do have faculty who are more tuned into assessment, and I'm working with some, but I have not felt like I could go to my faculty and say, hey, here's this other thing they're doing, and maybe we'll do it. You want to try it? They would shoot me. Well, okay, they wouldn't shoot me, but they would not appreciate the experimentation angle of it. So I've been waiting, and maybe others feel differently. But I will say, I spoke with Nydia Duenas, who used to be on this council. I was just talking to her yesterday, and she has a lot of her legal writing faculty that are playing around with modifying to do skill-based that is less, what we traditionally see, memorandums and things like that. But I think we're all maybe a little bit in a holding pattern, but I won't speak for everybody.
Yeah, Carly.
Yeah, I agree with Mary. The most that we've kind of done is try to incorporate more like performance test skills, like, okay, legal skills, let's incorporate a performance test. We know those are safe for now. So we've been kind of focused on that. We've just been keeping our faculty updated. But I mean, truthfully, we haven't made any changes to our, like our bar curriculum or anything like that yet. Yeah, we're in a holding pattern. But I mean, along those lines, we are going to have to start getting these, curriculums created, and then they have to go to approval. They have to go to the curriculum committee, then they have to get voted on by the faculty. So all of this takes time, obviously, as everyone knows. But yeah, I agree with Mary. We've been pretty hesitant to make any changes like integrated question sets or anything like that. But as far as the performance test, we're just trying to work that in a little bit more now. We know that's safe. So
Yeah, I will say that we actually did do a presentation for the faculty last week just to clarify, to try to give information, what we know, what we don't know, what's pending. We were getting a lot of interesting comments from our students. Oh, I heard, community property is not on the bar anymore, or remedies isn't on the bar, and they were kind of getting mixed messages. And so we had a good session. It was voluntary, but probably the most well-attended voluntary session that we've had. And to your points where we said, look, the performance test, safe. Multiple choice, the pick two is going to be a little bit different, but still kind of within the same vein. But the biggest pause was when we showed them the integrated question, and they said, okay, yeah, this is a little bit different. To the credit of the faculty, they started raising hands. How can we start creating these now? Can we have a committee? So I think it was good, and that it's priming them for if the decision does go that way, it won't be as much of a shock. And if it doesn't go that way, it's, hey, look, you've seen another way that you might want to test. And as mentioned earlier, our LRW faculty have been great about embracing this. They've been attending conferences for the last few years and been very engaged. And they are incorporating more of these skills-based testing components into the curriculum. So I think they're going to be great partners and maybe the first ones to sort of be able to roll this out quickly.
If you just want a head count, Cody, put me in as a yes as well. I have talked to my faculty about the changes, but all I keep saying to them is we definitely know in July, and all we can do is hope the Supreme Court doesn't wait that long.
Well, I had created my presentation to have a list of other questions. We end up touching on all of them, so I don't think I need to bring my slide deck up. I guess I'll just reiterate, happy to explore any other areas that we didn't cover or any concerns or considerations if there's anything we haven't talked about yet before I give one final update. And I'll give the floor to the members if there's anything else that we want to explore. I'll tee up one of the questions I had. So I kicked off this first part of the discussion by describing the preliminary guiding principles that the board adopted and whether or not these options were meeting it. There were then the factors. One area where I think we could really benefit from your perspectives is I'm going to describe it in this way purposely. What are the tangible and intangible benefits to examinees that would result from either of these options? And I'm using that language because part of our mandated reports is to articulate what are the tangible and intangible benefits for examinees. We can create a list that we think makes sense, but you all have, I think, much closer proximity and a unique perspective. So I'd love to open the floor to that question if you are willing to help us understand kind of what you think are the benefits for either one of these options for examinees, for students, that is.
Always happy to help. Cody, I just want a little bit more clarification on your question. Are you asking with specifics to a particular option? You had presented two. So which tangible
Either of
benefits
these
are we
options.
discussing?
Yeah, I don't want to narrow anyone's, I don't want to presume that anyone prefers any option.
Okay.
Well, I can provide this level of specificity. When it comes to kind of tangible and intangible benefits, some of the things that we are thinking about is affordability, accessibility, and that can mean, accessibility from a user experience standpoint, or also accessibility from a uh, scheduling and administration. The ability to take the exam more often is something that was explored. The preparation resources that we covered, I think, is a benefit. And even as an intangible benefit, just greater confidence in the exam, depending on one of these options. So I don't want to presume that Nagin, that you have a preference here, but you could speak to either one, and I'd love to just get a sense of what you see as the benefits for examinees for either one of the options.
I think generally, with respect to examinees, they certainly want stability first and foremost. You're talking about a subsect of people who are very focused, who are very disciplined, who are very mindful, and each and every one of us have the great pleasure of working with them and being also part of this populace. Most of the examinees would tell you, or I can't think of any examinee that would tell you, I can't do it. They just want to know what is expected of them. So stability is key. If we know what the goal is, they will find their way. That is their journey. I don't hear too much with respect to cost. It's not that I have not heard that, but the one piece that I do hear about, and maybe it's because of the types of classes I teach, they tend to be practicum, they tend to be our LLM classes, also online classes. Accessibility is also key. So unlike what was presented, and I certainly understand that might be the trend this time around, with the answers that was provided, that remote wasn't necessarily something that was sought after, but I actually tend to hear, and it doesn't necessarily have to be remote, but accessibility. That comes in all forms, even with respect to accommodations and how that is handled by the bar. Everybody, again, is well-meaning, doing well, but stability, number one, accessibility, number two. And that I hear echo. It's a resounding echo, but just comes in different formats.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And under that accessibility, as I mentioned, of course there's remote exams, but we had in February the hybrid model. They were ideally we were aiming for test centers that were local or closer to test takers. We didn't quite achieve what we had hoped, but that's a model that's out there as well. So that proves accessibility just from reducing the financial barriers for travel and lodging. So there's a lot of ways I think to think about that. So thank you for sharing that, Nikki.
My pleasure.
Yep, Susan.
Just to add to the list of accessibility, I think it's important to recognize that Next Gen is a day and a half long exam. A student with double time accommodations takes a 3-day exam. The current California exam is 2 full days. A double time accommodation is 4 full days. That whole additional day is more travel, more hotel, not to say nothing of the stress of a 4-day exam. I know that my law school, like many of those present here today, is seeing increasing numbers of accommodated students. As those accommodated numbers continue to rise, we continue to see more students with a double time accommodation. That is definitely something that favors the next gen exam for applicants in terms of accessibility and accommodations.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you, Susan. I mean, we are seeing an uptick in our TA trends as well. Okay, well, let me provide my last update on my final slide. But I don't need a slide to share this. As I mentioned, the next steps in our process for considering this choice is to synthesize the research and these discussions and all the additional inputs that we're receiving into this risk benefit analysis. And what this benefit analysis is going to achieve is respond to a list of requirements that the Supreme Court has asked us to report on before making a recommendation. It's what we're calling, or what's called Rule 9.6B. And then also there was a bill that was passed in the last legislative session here in California that requires the state bar to report on whether adopting a uniform bar exam would be more efficient and less costly for the state bar and examinees. And so we are creating a single report with the intention of addressing both of these requirements. The next steps are that on Friday, the subcommittee of the examination and development of the Committee of Bar Examiners will meet. They were looking at a very preliminary draft, so I encourage anyone here to take a look at it. But as it exists today, there are sections in which we haven't started yet building out. There are sections in which we've indicated what type of content will be added. But we're going to have an initial discussion so that just like here, we can gather some input and that can help us modify another draft that will be considered by the Committee of Bar Examiners and the Board of Trustees on March 13th. And so this draft will be it'll be an iterative process to get to a final version. So what you'll see now is very preliminary. What you will see in March will be more closer to final form, and we'll continue to gather input from stakeholders to help shape that. And that's all I had. If anyone has any additional questions, I'm happy to respond to them. Okay, well, that was a really robust discussion. I really appreciate everyone's candid feedback and all the great nuanced perspectives that you all have offered us. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Cody.
Bye, everybody.
Chris, would you like to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, we can deem the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone.